Sometimes we get these topics for these deep dives that, I don't know, they kind of take me by surprise. This is one of them. Someone sent in this YouTube transcript. It's from this channel called Bible and Coffee, and it's all about why fasting attracts God. And I got to be honest, my first thought was fasting. Like, isn't that more of a diet thing?
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I mean, everywhere you look these days, it's all about the latest health trends, right?
Mm.
But what's interesting here is that the video, it separates those kind of trendy diet ideas from fasting as a spiritual practice. It's almost like it's saying, okay, before we even talk about what you're eating or not eating, let's get clear on the why behind it.
Yeah, that really struck me too. Like, I realized I was bringing all these assumptions about what fasting is to the table. Did you find that?
For sure. We tend to fixate on the act of not eating, right? But
Yeah.
this video, it seems more focused on the internal shifts that are supposed to happen during a fast.
Absolutely. So it's not just about emptying your stomach. It's about creating space for something else, something spiritual.
Exactly. And that concept, it's not new. The video actually does a great job of grounding it in history, showing how fasting is something that shows up in all these different religions, not just one.
Yeah, and it really highlights that. Okay, I have to ask about this whole body as machine thing from the video. It definitely stuck with me, but I'm curious to hear your take on it.
It's a good analogy, right? I think it helps us get our heads around this idea that our bodies, they need different kinds of fuel to function at their best.
Hmm.
And yeah, we're used to thinking about food as fuel, but what if there's another kind of fuel, a spiritual nourishment that we access through things like fasting?
I like that. It's like giving ourselves a different kind of energy boost.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder, like, in our obsession with physical health, have we kind of lost sight of some of these ancient practices that address our spiritual needs?
That's such a good question. And it's something I think about a lot. This video, though, it doesn't just talk about fasting in general. It gets into some specifics from the Bible. I'm curious, what did you think about all those references from the Old Testament, like Leviticus, to the New Testament with Matthew?
Honestly, seeing those examples, especially the ones about Jesus in the New Testament, it made me realize just how deeply rooted fasting is in the Christian faith. I mean, it's one thing to know it's an ancient practice, but it's another to see how important it was to Jesus and his followers.
And what's interesting is the idea of aligning your actions with this spirit of sacrifice. It's
Yeah.
not just about going through the motions, but about your intention behind it, right?
Yeah.
What are you hoping to achieve? What are you seeking?
That's a good point. Okay, but can we talk about the elephant in the room for a second? Because when I think about skipping meals, my mind immediately goes to like, "Ugh, I'm going to be so hungry." How does the video address those very practical concerns that I think most people probably have about fasting?
It's totally understandable, especially with, like you said, how food obsessed our culture can be. But you're right, it does address it. It actually encourages people to focus more on the sincerity behind the fast rather than making it, I don't know, like a big performance.
Right. It's not about being a martyr for the cause. So it's more about
Mhm.
the internal experience than the external display.
Right. Like the video says, quoting Matthew, "When you fast, do not look somber, but put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you."
Makes sense. And on a similar note, I was surprised when the video talked about fasting with a friend. I always thought of fasting as this really solitary thing.
Yeah, it's not usually what comes to mind. But the video, it emphasizes that there's power in shared prayer and support, especially when you're going through something challenging like a fast. There's actually a part in Matthew where Jesus talks about this, how when two or more are gathered, he's there with them.
Oh, yeah. It's almost like having a fasting buddy or an accountability partner for your spiritual life.
Exactly. And it makes me think that we often underestimate the importance of community, that shared experience, especially when it comes to faith. So yeah, the video really highlights that aspect.
That's a good point. But before I call like my best friend and we make a fasting pact, the video's pretty clear that you shouldn't just jump into this without a plan, right? What does it say about that?
It stresses intentionality, which I think is huge for any spiritual practice, really. It's not just about like saying no to a donut. It's about asking yourself, why am I doing this? What am I hoping to gain? It even suggests actually writing down your reasons.
Oh, interesting. Writing them down, huh? Why do you think that's important?
I think it's because when you have to write it down, you really have to think about it. It makes your intention so much clearer and more real. It's one thing to say, I want to feel closer to God, but what does that actually look like? What are you hoping to change or see differently in your life?
That's true. So you've got your reasons, your why. Maybe you've even convinced a friend to join you. Now what? What are the fasting options?
Well, the video makes it clear that there isn't just one right way to fast. It lays out several different types, and it's important to understand the differences because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing, It's not like, oh, I'll just pick this fast and see what happens. There are actually different types, and the video goes through these different types and how they work, when you might use one versus another. It's kind of like, I don't know, are you going to go for a walk or are you going to run a marathon?
Okay, yeah, I get you. It's all about finding the right approach, the right intensity. So walk us through these different types of fasts. What are options?
So the video starts with I guess you could say the most extreme one, and it calls it the absolute fast. And basically, it's exactly what it sounds like. You're giving up all food, all water for the entire time.
Wow, no food, no water. That's next level.
Yeah.
What's the reasoning behind going that extreme? I'm having a hard time even picturing that.
Yeah, it's definitely intense. The transcript, it actually gives an example. Paul in the New Testament, he fasted like this for 3 days right after he had his experience with Jesus, and it talks about it as like a total reset for your body and your spirit.
Okay, so probably not the best place to start if you're new to fasting, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you could say that. The video even says that this is something you work up to gradually. Like, you really have to be in tune with your body, your limits, especially if you have any health conditions. The goal is to challenge yourself spiritually, but not, put yourself in a dangerous situation.
Right, safety first. So if an absolute fast is like the marathon of fasting, what's a good one to start with? Something more beginner friendly?
The video talks a lot about what it calls the normal fast, and this is actually the one that's mentioned most often in the Bible. And with this one, you're not eating any solid food, but you are allowed to have liquids, things like water, juice, broth.
Oh, okay, so it's like a juice cleanse, but with a purpose?
Yeah,
That actually sounds doable. And then there's the partial fast, which is even more flexible.
exactly. So with a partial fast, you're not necessarily cutting out entire categories of food. It's more about being mindful of what you're eating and why. The video gives the example of the Daniel fast, which is based on the story of Daniel in the Bible. And Daniel, he chose to eat only vegetables and water for 10 days instead of the rich foods that were served, in the king's palace.
Right, right. So it's like making a conscious choice to keep things simple, strip things back to the basics. It's not just about what you're not eating, but like making a statement with your choices.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. It's about intentionality. And, there's another example the video gives, John Wesley's fast. He was this historical figure, and he would have only wholemeal bread and water for 10 days leading up to these big religious events.
Wow, 10 days of just bread and water. That takes some serious dedication. Okay, so we've got all these different options, but how do you know which type of fast is right for you? It's not exactly like, picking out a new pair of shoes.
It can definitely feel overwhelming. And the video talks about this too. It actually lays out a few things to think about when you're trying to choose the right fast. The first one they call the firsting factor. Basically, it just means being honest with yourself about where you're at.
So like, don't go from 0 to 60, fasting-wise.
Exactly. Don't be afraid to start small. The video actually suggests maybe trying a one-day fast first, just to get a feel for it. And then from there, you can, gradually make it longer or more challenging.
That makes sense. Don't compare your chapter 1 to someone else's, like chapter 20. So you dipped your toe in, you've done your one-day fast, maybe even a few. How do you know where to go from there?
The video talks about something it calls the matching factor. It's like you need to match the type of fast you choose with your intention, with what you're actually trying to get out of it.
So if I'm just looking for a little spiritual tune-up, maybe a normal fast is enough. But if I'm dealing with some bigger issue in my life, maybe I need a more intense approach.
Right. It's like choosing the right tool for the job. And this is where the next factor comes in, the comfort factor, because the video makes it clear that this isn't about making yourself miserable. It's actually really important to listen to your body, listen to what feels right for you.
Okay, that's good to hear. Because I was starting to feel a little, intimidated maybe.
It shouldn't be about forcing yourself into something that makes you feel awful, because if you're just completely focused on how hungry you are or how much you're denying yourself, you're not going to be open to the spiritual benefits, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about finding that balance. So you've got your intention, you found the right type of fast, but then there's also the timing of it all, right? Like life doesn't just stop because you've decided to fast.
Totally. The video even calls this out specifically, the time factor. It's
Okay.
about being realistic.
Yeah.
Don't choose a super intense fast during the busiest week of the year.
Yeah, set yourself up for success.
Yeah.
So you've thought about all these things, your motivation, the type of fast, the timing, and you're ready to take the plunge.
Yeah.
What's the final word from the video? What do you do next? It can't just be about picking a day and hoping for the best, can it?
It's interesting you say that because the video, it ends by saying that the preparation is kind of an act of faith in itself. And it includes this whole prayer.
Okay.
Yeah, listen to this. We ask God for wisdom to understand the spiritual purpose and benefits of fasting, reminding us that it is not only the deprivation of food that brings us closer to Him, but also the sincerity of our hearts and the desire for a deeper connection through prayer. May we fast not to be seen by others, but to be seen by the heart of God who watches in secret and rewards openly.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. Really puts things into perspective.
Yeah.
Like it's not about showing off or anything. It's about that internal change you're looking for, that desire for, I don't know, for something more.
And I think that's what makes this video, I don't know, it's more than just a how-to guide on fasting. It really gets to the core of what this practice is supposed to be about.
Right. It's not just about the mechanics of it. It's about the why.
Exactly. And it makes you realize that this isn't just some outdated practice.
Mm.
Fasting, it's something we can still benefit from today, especially in a world that honestly can feel so chaotic and overwhelming at times.
Totally. It's like hitting the pause button for a little bit.
Yes. You said it before, intentional emptiness.
Exactly. It's about creating space in your life, to just listen to what's going on inside and maybe connect with something bigger than yourself. I know, it's hard to explain.
No, I get it. It's not about depriving yourself for the sake of it. It's about being open to something new.
You know what? This conversation has actually inspired me. Part of me wants to try this, like actually give fasting a shot. Maybe after I finish off this bag of chips, though.
Well, hey, no judgment here. Like we talked about, it's about finding what works for you, right? Start small, be patient with yourself, see where it takes you.
That's the beauty of it, right? It's this ancient practice that's still so incredibly personal.
Totally. And you know what? While we were focused on a Christian perspective of fasting, it really got me thinking about how other religions and spiritual traditions view it.
Yeah. Like it's such a universal concept. There's probably a ton to learn from exploring those different perspectives.
Exactly.
Maybe that's a deep dive for another day. But for today, I think we've given our listeners plenty to digest.
I think that's an understatement.
So until next time, keep exploring, keep those questions coming, and hey, maybe even think about creating a little intentional emptiness in your own life.